of Octopus, and I'm in a slightly noisy cafe this morning, so I must apologise for that. It's a library cafe, and I'm also presenting off the world's smallest laptop screen, so I can't really see my slides very well, so apologies for that. I'm here with my colleague Tim Fellows from JISC to talk about Octopus, and I'm going to talk a bit about how Octopus is designed and what it's aiming to do, and then Tim will give you a tour of the site itself. So I came back to academia I'd done my doctorate, and then I went into filmmaking and documentary making. And when I came back to academia, I was really struck leading a research team about the problems that seemed to be created by the current publishing system that were causing my team and academics in general so much stress. And so I came up with the idea of Octopus to solve multiple problems. And the thoughts that occurred to me, actually, we've now just done some research and published a report that echoes some of the thoughts that I had, and actually also enhances them. And people told us more when we did this research at the University of Bristol about what they thought the problems were. And one of the things that surprised me was actually that we did interviews with people of all different career stages in all different disciplines. And almost everyone said that one thing they wanted was constructive feedback before they'd gone very far with a project, so that they could make sure that what they were putting all their money and resources and time and effort into was the very best plan in the first place. Then there was this big one that really stood out to me, that there are no good guides for research assessment. So when we're being assessed for jobs or for grants, at the moment, people just seem to go on a publication list, and there isn't a good way of knowing whether the work that is underlying those publications is of high or medium or low quality. And then, of course, there are also all the problems, reproducibility, all these things that we know about, publication bias, and the incentives that pressurize people to feel that they have to commit questionable research practices like e-hacking. And so when I thought about Octopus, I thought about how can we really be doing what we want to be doing better, which is sharing stuff more openly, more quickly, so that people can build on it, people can benefit from our findings, and that we can get credit for it. And as you can see from some of these quotes that people gave us when we were doing interviews, it's a real, at the moment, it's really hard for people. People feel that papers don't count as publications if they're in certain journals, and that just getting your name on the paper is the kind of gateway to success so often. So how can we also, as well as the outputs being helpful and useful to people, how can we make sure that the people doing that research are really being given the credit that they deserve when they do really good research work? So again, from the quotes, you can see people feel that they don't get recognition from doing certain types of work, and that they have to really kind of, as somebody puts it there, cheat in order to tick the boxes that they feel are being made to tick. And we actually asked people what they thought the boxes were that they felt they were being made to tick. And as you can see, right at the top, publication record, trendiness of research, novelty of research, those come above the rigor of methods. And almost all of them, well, all of them come above open research. So actually sharing your work openly for as many people as possible to be able to read it and build on it. So really, people probably quite rightly feel that the current system is not incentivizing them in the right way. And I think there's a very good reason why. And we've seen how much people feel that the publication record and what papers in journals that you've published are important. And I think when you look at what's important in journal articles, and this is an extract from the Guide for Authors from one of the top science journals, you can see what they're really helping people do, or encouraging people to do, is to maximize impact through getting a focused message, trying to increase readership and citations. None of this will be a surprise to you. We all know that this is what you're being incentivized to do. But I think there's a problem to that, because journals are really trying to do multiple things at once. On the one hand, They're trying to disseminate useful findings to people who they might help, which is great. But on the other hand, they're kind of being forced to be the primary research record, to be where everything is recorded in full detail, all the methods, all the data, all of these things that we need to be recorded. And these two things are almost in opposition to each other, because you need a very different kind of writing if you're writing to disseminate to an audience who just want to know what you found that's important to them, or to an audience who need to know everything that you did in full detail, all the things that didn't work, and everything that they might need to be able to replicate that. So I think what we need to do is to split these two jobs apart. And that's what Octopus is designed to do. It's designed to be serving that second thing, to be the primary research record, leaving journals to do the dissemination work. So journals already do a very good job of getting findings into the hands of people who want to read them. So the popular bits of journals are the news and views and the expert editorials and reviews of things. And on the other hand, Octopus can sit alongside that, almost like being the very organized supplementary information that gives all the links to the data in repositories, the code in repositories, to protocols, to pre-registrations, to all the other parts of the work that we do. And critically, that's not just supporting the dissemination, it's also making a good place for our research to be assessed, because that's where we're recording what we've actually done in enough detail for it to be assessed by people who might be then giving grants or giving promotions, giving jobs. So Octopus then, because we can design it to really fulfill that second primary research function, we can design it with all the 21st century tools, of course, and we can make it free to read, free to write, completely open, and we can build in things like automatic language translation and all these other things that we might want to do to break down barriers. But critically, it doesn't look like a journal because it's trying to do a different job. So we're breaking down the concept of the paper as the unit of dissemination, or publication rather, because I think the paper is causing a lot of problems. If you think about the way that we do research, you set out with a problem and then you do different stages, and each of these different stages requires quite different skills. It might be done by different people in a team working together. People who do the analysis might not be the people who design the method. They might not be the people who came up with the problem in the first place. It might not be the people who then implement it in real world. And at the moment, we kind of force people to collaborate in tight groups to get to the end of a very long process, and then to kind of retrospectively force a linear narrative on what they've done and tell a good story. When in the real world, our research doesn't look like that. And if we have a publication process that much more closely matches what the real world looks like, I think we can get away from some of the incentives that create the problems of questionable research practices, because so many of those are trying to retrospectively fit a linear narrative to show that your results prove your hypothesis, to put it in crude terms. So the structure of Octopus matches what you can see on the screen now. Each of these boxes is a publication in its own right. So a research problem is a publication, a well-defined research problem. Data is a publication. A hypothesis is a publication, an interpretation. And you can see it's a many-to-one and a one-to-many relationship. So you can have multiple hypotheses on how a problem might be approached. You can have multiple data sets collected to one according to one protocol, or you can have a meta-analysis that brings together multiple data sets. And we all know that this is ideal for reproducibility and replicability, but it also has a lot of other different advantages, which I'm going to just outline briefly. But you may have counted 7 different publication types on this screen and wondered why we're called Octopus. Well, there is an 8th type of publication, and that's a peer review. And you can see that on this screen, everything is linked to each other. And that's critical, because instead of kind of just throwing everything into a sort of repository, Octopus has this inbuilt structure to it. So you can't publish data without linking it to the protocol to which it was collected. And the protocol itself has to be linked to the hypothesis or the rationale behind it. And a review can be linked to any publication type, obviously. And so that turns reviews into something quite different. So there are lots of advantages and the reasons behind why we designed Octopus the way we did. I mean, for a start, it's instant publication. And that means that as soon as you're ready and your co-authors have approved it, that publication can get out there in the world. And there are so many good things that come from that. I mean, not only are you being able to get credit and people are being able to see your work quickly, but it removes this problem of scooping. And I'm going to come back to scooping because it's the #1 thing people worry about. So it means that once you've got your work out there, your hypothesis out there, your idea out there, it's got your name on it. It means that nobody can scoop you on that bit of the work. Everybody that does work subsequent to that will be linking to your publication. And as the quote there says, institutions do have to recognise this, and I'm sure we'll talk about how institutions are working with Octopus. Because we've got these smaller publication types, and smaller publications rather, we have smaller author groups. And this is again really important because it means that it's clearer who's doing what. All of these stories that we've heard about people not getting adequate credit, so people who are doing analysis or data collection, not only sometimes, well, often ending up as middle authors on a paper, and we know that that means that they're not getting as much credit as, say, the first authors or the last authors. But also, lots of people don't get recognition as authors on papers at all in some fields when they're doing this critical professional jobs in the middle of the research process, as it were. So these smaller author groups, and Tim will show you some examples, are really important for making sure people get credit for exactly what they do. The need for narrative. Now, this is something that's very close to my heart, and as I mentioned, I think it's really one of the big drivers for questionable research practices, because you're encouraged to tell a story. And stories, good stories, are not the same as good scientific practice. Not everything that you do that is good work ends up in a really good narrative. So removing the need for a narrative not only removes the incentives for questionable research practices, but it means that you can publish things that haven't yet told a good narrative. So just an idea, a small data set. All of these things are really valuable and really important and can be really, really good work, but they don't tell a good story. That shouldn't exclude them from the research output. All in all, one of the major things Octopus is trying to do is make sure that we put an equal emphasis on every part of the research process. I find that at the moment, so much emphasis is on the results, the findings, and on the impact of those. And I think that that's one of the reasons people worry so much about scooping, because they think the results are everything, which in the current situation, in current scholarly publishing process, in a way they are. And so you worry that if you publish your ideas, if you publish your protocols, people will get to the findings first. But in Octopus, every part of the research process is equally important, including peer reviewing. And that's critical to professionalizing and allowing people to become specialists. And I mentioned peer review there, and this is, again, it changes the way that we think about peer review. Not only is peer review, because everything's out there as soon as you press the button, not only is peer review open and post-publication, but that changes the way that we think of what peer review is. Because at the moment, when you're submitting to a journal and you have peer reviews kind of standing in between you and publication, which is the kind of be-all and end-all, it sets up an antagonistic relationship. You're trying to get through that hoop. Whilst if you've ever written a registered report, which is a form of publication where you submit to the journal at the point of having designed your methods, and then you get in principle acceptance, and the peer reviewers help you get those methods right, and then the journal has committed to publishing whatever the results are, whatever happens after that stage. It really changes how you feel about peer review, because your peer reviewers are your friends now. They're helping you get to the point where it's accepted and you can go away and do that work, and you know that you'll get a publication at the end of it. Well, Octopus is kind of taking that to the extreme, and at every stage now you can publish, you can get peer review, and your peer reviews are helping you, because then you can reversion that work if you need to, and if your peer reviewers suggest good things that you want to take into account. So I think it's really important to be able to do that. And also, somebody says there should be grunts assessing grunts. A peer review of a data set or a peer review of an analysis is a very different thing from a peer review of an overall paper. It's somebody with specialist expertise looking at something that is specialist and expert. And the way that, at the moment, peer reviewing is something you kind of do for free as a contribution to the scholarly publishing or the academic environment. But people should be given credit for doing that. And I don't mean just, or payment or all these other things that people have been suggesting as credit for peer reviews. Peer reviewing is a skill in its own right, and so it should be treated like that. And so peer reviews are a publication in their own right. We have a level sort of deeper of research assessment, which is ensuring research integrity. Because Octopus is a platform where anybody can publish anything, there are no gatekeepers. We almost have to have a slightly more formal inbuilt system. But I think it's better than the current system of kind of waiting for months and then big retractions happen and nobody wants to retract the paper. In Octopus, any reader can raise a red flag against the publication if they have a serious concern, and they write what it is, and that emails to the authors, but also is available for readers. So you can read something and read somebody's concerns about it openly, and in your own head take those concerns into consideration. And then, perhaps the authors will reply, and perhaps that can be reversioned or resolved, and the red flag can then be lifted. Overall, what I hope Octopus does is change the way that we approach our careers and the work that we do. I've already mentioned this importance of specialisation. At the moment, so many people feel that they need to do and be good at everything at once. Octopus allows you to be a specialist and to get credit for being a specialist. You are perhaps an analyst or a data collector. You can concentrate on doing that job to the best of your abilities and collaborate with everybody. So I think at the moment it's a bit like we're being incentivized to build really tall towers and put flags on the top, and everybody's distracted by the flags and they want to build as tall a tower as possible. Nobody's really looking or worrying too much about the foundations of those towers. But in Octopus instead, what we're all being incentivized to do is to create bricks that are of so robust as we possibly can, and to put them in the right places. Everybody puts their solid bricks in the right places. The towers will emerge, and there'll be towers built on strong foundations, because everything is being assessed and credit is being given for doing that good work. So it's kind of findings are a kind of a property that emerges from doing work properly in the first place. And I mentioned that we asked people what currently prevented them from sharing their research plans. And the fear of being scooped was the biggest one. And I hope that Octopus can remove that, because we're not putting everything on these findings and results. And I hope that we can also solve so many other of these issues on this list of not knowing where to publish, of feeling that there's no benefit to a career to doing these things, not knowing how to do things, not knowing how to write it up. I hope that we can solve all of these problems at once. And I just want to finish on this slide, which is recognising that there are important aspects for every organisation or institution within the scholarly publishing community. So researchers, I think Octopus has clear benefits for, and I've talked about those. I think for journals, as I said, we're designed to sit alongside them so that they can carry on having a commercial model if they want, where they are concentrating on disseminating and synthesizing evidence, whilst Octopus sits alongside it and structures and holds the primary research in an open and accessible form. I won't talk about what's in it for funders, but suffice it to say that it's designed to also completely change the way that funders work. And institutions, there are clear benefits in the way that it can help better assessment of researchers within institutions. And I hope that we can persuade institutions and funders of these benefits, and we are talking to them a lot, because they, I know, are the ones that currently drive so much of the incentive system. So I've talked a lot. I'm going to hand over now to my colleague Tim, who's going to show you what Octopus actually looks like.
Thank you very much, Alex. Right, I will attempt to share my screen. You should be able to see that now. Please do shout out if you can't.
You can see that, that's great.
Fantastic. Okay, so here we are on the platform itself. There's a few things that will probably jump out to you here that are immediately apparent. I think that the main thing that is good to mention right off the bat, so that you've got the right sort of thing in mind as we go through, is a note about these publication types that we've got up at the top here. So what we can see here, we can see the series of tiles, and each one of these are one of these self-enclosed publications that Alex was talking about, and here they've been linked together to form this chain that represents a research project. Now you notice above these we've got the names of the publication types. So for instance, this is a rationale hypothesis that we're viewing now. We've got a method, results, and so on. And the big point here is that these are somewhat STEM orientated terms. So if you don't work directly within STEM, don't worry. The platform has been designed for all disciplines. It's not designed to just be for STEM researchers, but we needed something to refer to these publications as. So we're working with researchers to try and come up with more discipline agnostic terms for these. And that's something we obviously need to be quite careful about to make sure that we have the right sort of framing for what these publications are. But perhaps just to help you sort of picture how this could work for a research project in your discipline, it's easier to think of these instead of as a research problem or a hypothesis or a method. Perhaps think of them as the question that you're trying to answer at this stage. So one of the things that Octopus the Octopus kind of relies upon is this idea that there are fundamental steps to the process of inquiry, to the research project, that can be defined as a series of questions. This is how I like to think of them anyway. So this would start off with a research problem, which is sort of what is the gap in the knowledge? Then a hypothesis is what do we expect to happen? The method is how will we find this out? The results are what did we find? The analysis is what can we tell from that? The interpretation is what do the trends and patterns in the analysis mean? And finally, the real world application, hopefully pretty self-explanatory, is what is the real world application? And perhaps thinking about it like that just means it's a bit easier to model this onto how you would do your research instead of looking at it just through the sort of STEM lens. So a few things to point out about these publications up at the top here. As I mentioned, this represents a research project starting with the research problem, moving over through a rationale hypothesis into the methods and so on. And I think the first thing that's quite obvious is we don't have a single method, results, etc. here. There's two of them. And this is where two different authors have come in and decided to add methods against the same hypothesis to test it in different ways. So we have a method up at the top for online surveys, and we've had a second one added for qualitative interviews. Both of those have then been taken into their own sets of results, their own analysis, and then tied back in an interpretation that brings the two together again. In this case, I do happen to know that this team, it's a single team that are working on this, so they proposed two different methods as part of their project, but it doesn't have to be like that. I, as another researcher or reader who's just having a look at this publication, is completely unaffiliated with the rest of the team, would be able to add an additional method to this hypothesis here to test it in another way. So you don't actually have to be involved directly with the people who've published the other publications to contribute. You can sort of add something onto the back of someone else's publication and, giving credit and derivation, take it out in a new direction. And this opens the door to a lot of quite interesting ways of working. So I think my favorite one to point to is for an analysis publication. Let's say I'm a wandering data analyst looking for something to analyze, and I come across someone else's analysis publication, and they're doing some quite interesting things with the data that they're analyzing, but there's a particular technique that I think could have some really interesting outcomes for that data set that they haven't applied as part of their analysis. What I could do is I could go over to the results publication, and I just need to come down here. You see on the bottom right, we've got this write a linked analysis option. I could hit that, and I could publish my own analysis of their data set using this technique that I'm a fan of, and contributing to this this network of publications as a whole with a new perspective and a new sort of investigation. This can happen to any of these publications. So another way to do it perhaps is to do a reproducibility study of some sort, where I would take their method and I would just publish the results after having taken their method and run that effectively. I could publish an alternative hypothesis to test a research problem, and so on. And obviously this also means that, for instance, if I were the person who published the original hypothesis, and it didn't turn out quite how I'd expected it to, I could always come back in and publish another hypothesis saying, well, there was this original hypothesis that wasn't quite correct, but we think X, Y, Z based on the findings from that. So I could publish another one here. And the idea is that over time, these networks of publications will sort of grow organically based upon the starting point of a research problem, with different people suggesting different things and with the team sort of adding on more publications as they work through it. On the note of research problems, the other big way you can bolt things onto these publications is by adding a new research problem. So let's say I'm looking at the interpretation here, perhaps, and I could be one of these authors that you can see listed along here, or again, I could just be another reader coming in and having a look. Either way, if I think that there's perhaps another gap in the knowledge, another problem that is worthy of its own path of discovery, path of research, that's been identified as part of this publication, that's been alluded to somewhere in here or implied perhaps, I can use this option over here to write a linked research problem, which again, giving credit and derivation to the authors of this publication, will take it out in a new direction. What this will give me is another one of this sort of publication you can see here on the left-hand column in a new network, I suppose, ready for myself or someone else to take that out into another research project. I suppose the final note about research problems before I move away from talking about this lovely structure we have up here at the top is they're quite a short publication. So a research problem, if we go over and take a look at it, it doesn't necessarily need to be a huge amount of work. So it really is just spelling out what is the gap in the knowledge. As I said, it's not a massively in-depth piece, or it doesn't have to be. And therefore, it's quite an easy thing to throw onto the platform quickly, which is it opens up the door to perhaps giving a place to publish something that you may not necessarily get the chance to publish elsewhere, which is what I like to call the file drawer hypothesis. This is the idea that you've perhaps identified something during your research that is worthy of its own research project, but perhaps you wouldn't have time to take this into its own research project. Perhaps it's not directly within your area of expertise. For whatever reason, it's sort of sitting there as something you're aware of, but not something that you're going to have time to take anywhere. And what you can do with Octopus is you can just publish that research problem, and perhaps the hypothesis as well, and then just leave it there for someone else to come into the system and be inspired by it to take that out into a research project, build publications on the back of it, and investigate it. So hopefully this is quite a nice way for you to get credit for an idea that can then be taken out by other people into a full research project. And on the other side of that, there's a sort of a yin and a yang here of use cases, because researchers are able to publish these research problems they might not have time to investigate, but also that means other researchers are able to use the system as a discovery platform for things that they might want to research in future. So they can come in and have a look at that hypothesis that you've published, or that research problem that you've published, and they can make the choice as to whether or not they would like to contribute to that. And to try and facilitate this, we've actually seeded the system with about 7,000 of these research problems that we've derived from existing literature, which hopefully makes it quite a nice place to come in, have a look through, and see if there's something interesting in there to start taking a look at. One other thing that this structure here allows for is better attribution of who did what. So I think this is fairly self-explanatory, but let's say we're looking at, well, let's just look at the hypothesis here. You can see we've got these 6 authors listed against the hypothesis here. Now we'll take a look at this G. Reccia here. So G. Reccia is a data analyst. They work on data analysis, and often you'll find with specialist roles like that, analysts and other specialists may be relegated to somewhere within a list of authors. They won't necessarily be the first author or get a sort of real place to shine on a paper, because there's so many other people involved, and their role may not always be seen as the sort of, you know, the primary one within a paper. Well, with Octopus, they get their own place to showcase their work and to really show, you know, this is my specialist area and I'm the one doing this, I suppose. So here we can see on the analysis publication, G. Reccia is the first and indeed only author, and this gives them a place to showcase what they're doing specifically, rather than being part of a longer list of authors and sort of somewhere in the middle of that list. So I think this is quite a nice way to perhaps just give a bit more credit to specialists and kind of showcase what they're doing. On the note of specialization, the other thing that these smaller publication types allow is for much more specialized peer review. So by breaking down the research project into these stages, it allows for us to review an individual stage of a research project individually, instead of needing to review the entire project as a whole, which hopefully means that specialist peer reviews become a bit more approachable. So for instance, as another data analyst, I can come and have a look at this analysis publication and hit this option down here to write a review. And that will be a review just of this data analyst. I don't need to worry about anything that's happened in the hypothesis or the method or anything like that. I'm just looking at the analysis, which makes it a much shorter peer review, but also much more specialized into exactly what this is about. Another example perhaps is on the method publication. Let's say there's some code in there. It is a code-heavy method publication. As someone who's interested in reviewing that code, I'll be able to come in here and specifically review that code, that method, without looking at again the rest of the project as a whole. So hopefully that makes peer reviews perhaps more of an avenue for constructive feedback by looking at these sort of specific items rather than looking at the project as a whole more generally. And on the note of research assessment, I think there are a few other things to point out here. So I've mentioned peer reviews. I suppose to preface this, the platform has no barriers to publishing whatsoever. So it's completely free. And really the only thing you need to be able to publish on the platform is an ORCID ID. Once you have that, you can go away and publish, which is fantastic because it means we're making publishing something that's easier to do. But it does mean that in theory you could end up with things on the platform that aren't of the best quality. You could end up with people perhaps even misusing it. And so as well as peer reviews to provide feedback on a piece of research, we need a way for people to register if they actually have major concerns with the content of the publication. And to do that, we have the red flag system. So if I hit this option down in the bottom right here, this will give me a window where I can select from various sort of major concerns. I have plagiarism, ethical issues, and so on. And I'll be able to just detail a little bit about exactly what this concern is. If I submit that, that will do a few things. That will raise a red flag against this publication so that everyone can see that I've had this concern. And it will also raise it against my user profile, my user account page, so people can see that I've raised it. So there's some accountability on me to show that I've actually registered this concern as well. The third thing it will do is it will open up a dialogue between myself and the authors of this publication, so we can hopefully work to a resolution. On the note of account pages, because I just mentioned those. So as I mentioned, you need an ORCID ID to publish. All of our accounts on the platform are linked to ORCID IDs, which means if I hop onto one of our author profiles over here, we'll just give it a moment. You can see here we have some information about the sort of information from ORCID about this author, the works that they've got on their ORCID profile. And then down here at the bottom, we also have what they've been up to on Octopus. So this includes peer reviews, publications, red flags, and things like that. So hopefully this is a nice way to kind of tie up everything that a researcher's been doing on the platform in one place to kind of keep track of everything they're up to and explore what they're doing. There is also a third form of research assessment that we're looking at, and this isn't one we've launched yet because we need to make sure we get this right, because it is something that has the potential to for us to get it wrong, and I think would be quite concerning if we did. So we're consulting with researchers about this at the moment to make sure that we have the right approach. This is a quality metric system. So to give a bit of background, in the journal publishing world, I suppose, you have impact factors. You have these sort of metrics that is a quick, easily summarized number that represents the impact of a publication, the impact of a journal, whatever it may be. And we need an alternative. We need something similar, a numeric figure that we can use to give people a quick summary of a publication. So this all stems back from the fact that because we don't have any barriers to publishing, because people can just put things on the platform, we need the community to be able to quickly tell whether or not something is credible and whether it's of high quality. And to do that, as well as the peer reviews and red flags, we need something that people can digest and provide feedback on quickly. And that's the quality metric system. So this goes back to the idea that research has these fundamental stages that can be defined with a, with a question ultimately, or with a sort of a common definition across disciplines. So what we would do for this this system is take each of these stages, each of these publication types, and assign 3 criteria to it that encompass the perceived quality of that stage in the research project. So, for instance, for a data publication, for a results publication, it could be that the data set's of sufficient size to test the hypothesis, that it's well annotated, and perhaps that it's fully available. And what we would do is we present those 3 criteria to readers of this publication so that they could score it on a sort of 1 to 5 scale or something like that, which would do a few things. It gives readers a very quick way to give feedback on a publication. It gives the authors of that publication a quick way to see how it's being perceived by the community, how it's being received. And hopefully it sort of builds up a picture of how the publication is being perceived, I suppose. Those ratings would also display on the user who rated on their profile, so that, again, there'd be some accountability for how they're rating. But we obviously need to make sure we get this right. So the idea of scoring publications in this way is new, and it's not something we want to rush into. So we're consulting with researchers at the moment to try and make sure that we get terms that work across disciplines, to make sure that we've built this so that it can't be gamified, and to make sure that we've built it so that it actually does provide a meaningful measure of how the community are receiving that publication. So that's something we're not sort of rushing to launch, but I think we're quite excited for the potential it has, even if we need to make sure we get it right. So we've got various forms of research assessment, which hopefully mean that the platform is a place where you can get constructive feedback quite quickly for these the specific step of the research project that you're looking at. But what do you do with that feedback? Well, what we're building at the moment, and I really say at the moment because this should be released in the next week or two, is our reversioning system. So let's say you've had some feedback on your publication, someone's perhaps peer reviewed it and suggested that you detail something a bit more clearly, or that you adjust a few parts of your publication, something like that. With reversioning, you would be able to take this publication that you've got and publish a new version over the top of the old one. So it would retain the old version, and users would be able to switch back to seeing version 1 of your publication. But you're now able to make edits and make sure that you've taken that feedback into account and refined it so that you're I suppose putting your best foot forward. So you're taking that feedback into account and publishing the highest quality publication you possibly can. So that's another one that's quite exciting, because I think it really will make Octopus a place where you can not only get your work out early, but you can then refine it in accordance with the feedback you're getting from the community into something of higher quality, in the same way that publishing your hypothesis so early, or your method so early, and getting feedback on it allows you to hopefully shape the later stages of your research project in line with the feedback that you've received, again, earlier on. A few other points to note. I should have mentioned this at the start. Every publication gets its own DOI and its own CC by 4 license. So as I've said, they are independent publications, but it's worth pointing out that they're independent publications, as in they actually get a DOI, so they're separately citable and can be listed separately, and peer reviews also get a DOI as well. I think that's about everything to go through here. Alex, I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to jump in with.
I just wanted to mention the fact that you'll notice there that authors, their first names are published and their institutions are published. So on each publication, because Octopus is a platform where research assessment is at the heart of it, we're trying to remove causes of potential bias when people are assessing a publication. So although you can click on an author name and you can go and see what their institution is and you can see more about them, when you first see a publication, when you might be assessing it, we want to try and minimize bias. So there's no first names, no institutions available in that way.
Fantastic. So, yeah, I think that's about all we've got. So I guess we can open up for questions there if that works.
That's great. Thank you, Tim and Alex. Is there any questions? Silke?
Hi, thank you so much. Really great presentation. I'm such a fan of this. I think it's such a great idea. I guess my questions are more to Alex around the sort of uptake of it, because as you said, it does require changes in behavior, both by researchers, by institutions, but by funders. And in your experience so far, what have been the biggest hurdles to address in relation to that? So that's one question. The second question is around, obviously Research England, UKRI are supporting this, which is fantastic. Is there any indication that this may be taken up as part of the people, culture and environment for the next REF or in any other form of research assessment? And then my final one is probably to both of you, which is in my institution, if I wanted to use it for research assessment, how do I go about checking some of this out? So I whilst you were talking, Tim, I was going into it, but I didn't find it all that easy to even check out who from Leeds Beckett University is on there. I know some colleagues are using it already, so check those out. But it's, for me, what is the best way of searching for it if I want to use it as part of institutional processes for assessment?
Great questions. I know Tim will certainly answer the last one, so I'll start with the first two, which I think will probably come together, which is obviously, as you say, there's quite a big culture change required for everybody to move to a better publishing system. And I think there's a huge awareness of that, and there are major moves towards it. And funders are really in a position to drive that, because funders, more than anybody, well, along with researchers really, want the best quality research. You know, that is their only focus. Some of them are more impact focused, so for them the impact agenda works very well, but I think all of them want the highest quality research, sort of almost regardless of impact. And so, as you say, we are funded by UKRI, and obviously UKRI is an enormous funder in the UK and has a lot of power through things like the REF. So of course we're working with them to work out Octopus's position within the REF and how UKRI can help promote it. But we're also talking to other funders as well, and institutions, because it's almost like everybody needs to hold hands and take a big leap together. And that's, you know, it's difficult to coordinate, but I feel like there is at the moment so much openness to taking new opportunities, because nobody thinks the current system is working for them. I would say that for researchers who might, you know, we're all under pressure as researchers, we've got limited resources. We've tried to make Octopus a place that is useful to you even now, even before we know what the next breath involves and what the funders are going to be doing with their, you know, open access policies and all of that. In that, first of all, we're partnering with some journals where Octopus publications can almost be, as I said, like a kind of supplementary information, first of all, but they could also be like a preprint server. So you can put things on Octopus and then submit to Royal Society Open Science at the moment. And lots of journals that we've spoken to have absolutely no problem with Octopus being used like a preprint server or like supplementary information. So when you publish, you can publish all of the code and everything that you want to publish alongside, along with the journal article, and cite them during the journal article. But I think from the researcher's point of view, that also gives you benefits because in many fields there are stages like pre-registration where you're currently using pre-registration sites like protocols.io. All of these things that you're currently already doing can be tied into Octopus. So you can use Octopus as a pre-registration site. I do that. You can use it to tie in your pre-registration. So all of the things that you're doing as part of good practice and open practice can be used. You can tie them together in Octopus and then hopefully get credit for it. And when I say hopefully, we're already at the moment working with things like PubRouter, and I'm going to hand over to Tim who can talk about that and how it's already designed to plug into the back-end systems in institutions to ensure that it goes straight to your institutional repository and plugs into the systems. And I'll hand over to Tim to talk about that.
Yeah, well, it actually kind of ties into to the third question about how you would use the platform for research assessment, because I was having a bit of a think about how you would organize it so that you were looking specifically at things for your institution. And I think, well, that there's two ways. One is that we're going to be building at some point on our roadmap a kind of institutional portal. Is one of the things we're looking at potentially to summarize, what you've got as an institution. And there will also be API tools so that you could grab that data automatically. But the other way would be via this publications router integration. So it's the idea that Octopus spits out every publication that has a Leeds Beckett affiliation so that it goes into your institutional repository. So you'd have a fairly easy sort of stream of information about every publication coming through that's been published by anyone who said they're affiliated with Leeds Beckett on the platform. And that would give you quite an easy way to keep track of what's going on the platform. On an institutional level, if you did then want to go back onto the system to conduct research assessment, I think that would probably be the most straightforward way to do it.
And obviously we're talking to UKRI about the next ref and how Octopus publications, because as you say, they've already said that they're very keen that it's not so focused on publication records in terms of papers. They want other research outputs. And so how can Octopus serve those other research outputs into the next ref?
Yeah, I think that the preview that we had a little while ago mentioned contributions to the discipline as having a weighting, and there, which I think is very encouraging for us, because with things like a dedicated methods publication, that's really hopefully knocking on the door of that section of the next ref.
Thank you, Dan. Great.
Thank you. Does anyone have any more questions? Amy?
Hi, thanks for a really great presentation. It's really exciting, the potential for Octopus. You mentioned the kind of labeling of some of your tiles at the moment is quite STEM focused. I was just wondering what the kind of ratio of what you already have in Octopus is between sort of STEM and more humanities subjects.
It's actually quite varied. I hesitate to say this off the top of my head, but I think it may even lean away from STEM. We've had archaeology publications, we've had some meta science publications and things like that. Psychology publication. Well, I suppose that's STEM. But yeah, there is a reasonable mix in there. I think that's obviously very encouraging because it means people are overcoming this sort of STEM focused language that we've got on the platform. But on the other hand, it implies that we're missing a bit of an opportunity there, because if it was even more friendly looking to other disciplines, we may well be getting even more publications from other disciplines. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. Any more questions?
Whilst people are thinking, one thing I was going to say is that another use for Octopus is you can use it as for postscripts. So this example that Tim's got on the screen here, it's actually taken from a publication that my group published during COVID. And we, after publication, we put things on Octopus, because of course you can do that just like Green OA, just like you can put author accepted manuscripts into your institutional repository. You own the rights to put the content, not the formatting, but the content of your publications in journals into repositories, including Octopus. So in this case, we could put more detail in Octopus, analyses that hadn't been in the final paper or whatever. But you can, if you want to, for instance, explore publishing on Octopus after this seminar, you can take a paper that you've written and you can publish it in its constituent publications on Octopus. And that ticks your open access mandates. So it's another use case.
We have one question in the chat from Liz. She just wanted to ask how or if your team are able to avoid having embargoed material posted on the platform.
Well, we have to rely on authors for that. So there isn't currently, and it was something I was going to mention to Tim, there isn't currently a way in which you can publish with an embargo on Octopus. So you can't put it in and then say publish on this date, which would actually be a useful feature, and I hope we can add that into our roadmap somewhere. But at the moment, we have to rely on authors to press publish on the date and the moment that they want it to go live. But yeah, hopefully we can build in an embargo.
And Silke.
I've got so many questions I want to take over. But clearly what you want to do, as you said in the beginning, is to encourage publications on the whole of the research process rather than just the end product. So far, in terms of the uptake, what do people gravitate towards? Is it really that whole research process that you get publications on, or is there any particular element that people seem to go for more?
Actually, I think it is the whole thing. What people tend to do at the moment, and I myself do this, is we still think about a finished paper, because my postdocs need finished papers. So we publish all the constituent elements, and we do them kind of earlier than the paper. So I've got a chain at the moment where we've used it as a pre-registration. So we published the problem and the hypothesis and the method, and then we went away, did the work, published the results and the analysis, and now we've got a new problem coming off that. So we're publishing as we go, and then once we've got a couple of experiments in the same area, we'll then submit it as a journal paper as well, in a narrative form. And that seems to be what a lot of people are doing. So people within the fields that I'm most familiar with use it for pre-registration. So I've seen a couple where they've stopped at the methods, and I'm assuming that they're going away and going and doing the results. And we've seen some people who have published the entire chain, who maybe it was a publication to start with, or I don't know quite what the workflow is, but we haven't seen a lot of people just publishing a problem yet. I don't think, Tim, but you might be more. I haven't browsed around.
We have had a few. We actually had one a couple of days ago on golden prime symmetry, I believe. Yeah, we do get them from time to time, which is quite nice to see people putting ideas on the platform and leaving them there to see if they grow roots.
And of course, there's standard operating procedures. Quite a lot of people developing methods. And so they're getting to the method stage, and that is, that's it for them. That's their work, it's developing methods.
Excellent. We have a question from Ellie.
Hey, thank you so much, Alex and Tim. That was really great. I was just wondering, you were saying, Alex, that when you've been kind of using it as a way of sort of getting some feedback on papers before submitting them to journals, have you had any negative feedback from journals about the fact that you've published publicly in Octopus already, or published some of it publicly in Octopus already?
No, journals that I've dealt with have treated it like any other preprint server. So they're used to people saying, I put this already on medRxiv, bioRxiv, SciArchive, whatever. And the one that I'm currently working on, that I mentioned, I'm going to submit it to Royal Society Open Science, which is a full partner with Octopus, so they know it's on Octopus. They will take into account any peer reviews on Octopus. So, they're very open to it, obviously.
There must be something quite good about having that more open peer review than relying just on the overworked journal editorial team.
Yes, they will go and get their own peer reviews as well, but it gives the starting point.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Carlton.
Hi. Yeah, I came a bit late to the start of the session, so apologies for that. But it was very informative and very helpful. I'm not familiar with this myself, so it's been quite enlightening for me, and I can see why it's so attractive in all sorts of different ways. So that all being said, I'm interested in what experience you've had of interactions around red flags.
I think I can say we haven't yet had any.
I don't believe so, no.
No.
Okay.
No, I have. There is one publication that slightly worries me on there, which I have thought about raising a red flag around. It's an area that I'm not a full expert in, so I'm waiting to see if somebody else raises it who's a bit more knowledgeable than me.
Yeah, no, that's helpful, and I guess that was the thrust of it, because I can imagine a situation in which one person's review, which could be quite critical, could then be another person's red flag. And going back to what was said about then people having done reviews and then being used by journals where they would go out for another reviewer, I understand what you were saying about trying to eliminate some bias associated with institutions and so on and so forth. But you could argue, couldn't you, that you're going to influence people directly with what's said in terms of one person's view, which might be a critical review but not a red flag. I didn't get a good look at the list, and I do appreciate when I did see some of the things that came up in the list of what constitutes red flags, why they would be red flags. But I was just interested in your views on that. So. Obviously,
Yeah.
as you get more experience of them, then
Exactly.
It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Exactly, and I think this is one of the things about both reviewing and red flagging is that, and in fact use of the platform generally, is that things you'll become more familiar with them and how they're used. I mean, I find at the moment still it can be a matter of judgment what goes into different publications. I think I've become now used to where a research problem turns into how you're going to approach it, which is the next publication. But there's all sorts of things where it's just a matter of familiarity because it's new to all of us.
Yeah, I mean, thanks for just splashing up the list there. I mean, we've got one at the moment. I'm not going to say anything in terms of detail of it, but undeclared image manipulation is something that's cropped up in one of our research teams, and this is through a kind of traditional journal, but it's become adversarial quite quickly. If I summarize it in that way.
Yes, and it's very easy for that to happen, which is why everything's open on the platform.
Yes.
So that hopefully people will feel the incentive to, write in a professional manner.
Yeah. No, I accept that, but I do think it will be interesting to see any tensions that are generated going forward. And that's not a criticism. It's just it's as I think everybody said it. Silke said it herself. It's going to constitute a requirement for major changes in behaviour. And therefore, this is about all of us working together to produce high quality research. So, but thanks very much for that.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there's no other further questions, then thank you everyone for attending, and thank you again, Alexandra and Tim, for that fascinating session and joining us this morning. We'll see you all soon.
Thank
Thank
you
you
very
very
much.
much. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.